Back when I was growing up, a lot of mobile games had purpose. They all wanted to be fun, easy to pick up, and most of all stand out. And this led to some of the earliest mobile games being just completely bizarre. Characters ragdolling into spikes, talking animals with janky, creepy animations, blocky survival worlds that feel lonely and eerie. These games weren't polished or perfect, and that's exactly why we remember them. Today I want to talk about the most interesting and unintentionally unsettling mobile games from the early days of the App Store. These games didn't really follow any rules, they kinda just existed to be weird, and grab the attention of the player, of course. Early mobile games were weird in ways that you don't really see today. Some of them were creepy and some of them just didn't make any sense, honestly. If you were young, a lot of the time you probably had no idea what you were even supposed to do in a lot of these games in the first place. And yeah, mobile games are still kinda strange now if you look at the ads. But back then, it actually felt like more than slop games just trying to sell you something every 5 seconds. But with hundreds of mobile games flooding the market these days, it's easy to forget just how strange some of the earliest ones were. So let's take a look at a few of the bizarre classics. And the first ones I want to cover, yeah, you definitely know them already. The games that don't really need much of an introduction. You had Talking Tom and Talking Angela where you could poke, talk to, and interact with a cat, or even Talking Ben who was a dog. All of these games were made by Outfit 7, a mobile company that started back in 2009, which was basically around the time iOS mobile games started becoming a thing. They specialize in these little interactive virtual pet games, and while they weren't designed to be creepy, the awkward animations and weird internet rumors around them definitely gave them a strange feel, especially for me as a kid. When you would talk to these animals, I'm sure you remember they'd record what you say and say it back just with a slight voice changer to make it like a little more high-pitched or something. Not only was that kinda creepy, but they were just janky and had awkward movements. Some of the animations were so strange it actually did feel kinda creepy how they're just sitting there staring at you. And of course there's the whole Talking Angela rumor that made it even weirder. If you don't remember, there was an internet myth for Talking Angela that the app was somehow spying on kids or that there was a creepy man visible in her eyes. None of it was true, and I know I was a little kid, but I couldn't even look at the characters after this. It really creeped me out. And to be honest, some of the pictures from researching this hoax while editing it even gave me the chills today, but it is like 3 AM in the dark. This is pretty off topic, but it also reminds me of those weird chainmail days on social media. I know it started with emails and letters or something, but you know what I'm talking about? You'd see these posts with just a creepy face and some caption like, "Share this with 10 people or you'll die tonight." I don't even know if it still pops up on stuff like Facebook anymore, but W engagement method, I guess. Anyway, let's get back to the talking games. Those things actually got really popular, and I'm sure you know of them. There was a similar style game by different developers called Charlie the Steak, where you basically stab, burn, and mess with a piece of talking meat. It was basically lost media for years until it finally returned to the App Store, and even though it's not an official release like the other games, it was still legitimately creepy and absurd, especially for a kid. But Charlie the Steak and the talking games weren't the only strange apps floating around back then. Another one I remember pretty clearly was SurvivalCraft, and on the surface you might be asking why I even put this game here, but I'll get into that. SurvivalCraft came out in 2011, basically right alongside Minecraft Pocket Edition, and for a lot of people it was the first experience they had with sandbox survival on mobile. It wasn't made by Mojang or official Minecraft of course, but it actually still had full worlds, crafting, animals, survival modes. It was a pretty good clone. Honestly, it almost stood alone, but it was just too influenced by Minecraft to consider it not a clone. But it was still one of the best ones because it ended up feeling like a mobile survival experience that was ahead of its time in its own weird way. Players also made mini-games and community shared levels, which I don't even think Minecraft Pocket Edition was doing at this time. Even though this game was pretty well put together, it definitely had its weird moments. The textures were blocky and ugly and sometimes really unsettling at a young age, especially the creatures and the main character. It's also kinda cool how this game had a mini story where you're kinda just a dude abandoned on an island by a ship. And the sound design didn't help for the creepiness either. The wind blowing across the empty landscape and the distant bit-crushed animal noises, it all gave the game a strange lonely feel. Almost liminal. Kinda like DayZ in a way if you ever played it. I'm not saying they're similar at all, yeah they're both survival games but they're completely different. They just both feel like dark and depressing and have that lonely feel. I don't know, it's cool. There's actually 2 DayZ mobile games if you didn't know, but unfortunately they're not that good. And while the core gameplay of SurvivalCraft was simple, you gather, build, survive, the combination of empty worlds, eerie noises, and glitchy animations made SurvivalCraft feel like a game that was a little off. But honestly, I like this game a little more than Minecraft, at least on mobile, and yeah, I know that's a controversial take. I'm not saying it's better than Minecraft on PC or console, but compared to Pocket Edition, SurvivalCraft was more my style. You're really grounded in what you can do in the game and what it expects from you. It's challenging in a way that makes every decision kinda matter. There were crossbows, more clothing options for your character, and a lot of stuff you honestly didn't get in Minecraft. And even the newer updates, you could play split screen on mobile, which was wild for a game at the time. I feel like that'd probably be a mess though and not that good unless you had an iPad. But yeah, SurvivalCraft might have been a Minecraft clone, but I honestly think it held its own pretty well, especially for games on the phone at the time. Moving on from SurvivalCraft, next up are the Mcdickie Games, and yeah, I mean the really weird ones like Hard Times, School Days, and Last Testament. These weren't your usual mobile games at all. They were made by Mcdickie, an indie developer who had this strange signature style. Janky, blocky, a little messy, but full of weird little details that stick with you. The main one I spent the most time on was definitely Hard Time. You're basically in a prison trying to survive, deal with guards. You could even interact with other inmates, and there was a little bit of survival elements too. In all the games, the names and faces of characters are clearly inspired by real people, kinda like parodies of them, which makes everything feel oddly specific and funny. NPCs move in ways that's just slightly off and looks weird, sometimes glitching into walls and acting completely unpredictably. You can pick fights, run errands, or just wander around and see what chaos happens. It's honestly just weird and hilarious all at once. For a mobile game back then, it had way more depth than most people give it credit for. The other ones, School Days and Last Testament, follow the same weird style. School Days puts you in a chaotic classroom scenario where you can do almost anything, and The Last Testament, well, it's strange in all the ways you'd expect from early Mcdickie games. There's something addictive about wandering around in these games too and interacting with the NPCs, just figuring out how the systems work or just testing what the game will let you get away with. These games looked insane and absolutely bizarre, and they all had this strange energy. It felt almost like an Adult Swim kind of humor thing, you know what I mean? The weird faces and unusual names, everything was charming in its own weird, unpredictable way. And that feeling I loved in Mcdickie Games, just messing around with the way the world worked, it carried over into other mobile games I grew up with, and to be honest, for better or for worse. Probably for worse. Actually, definitely for worse. When I was growing up as a kid, violence was really popular online. I mean, it still is, but if you were playing flash sites or mobile games, you see a lot of it. If you grew up in the early 2000s playing flash games like me, you probably remember that these games weren't family friendly at all. A lot of them were brutal. Every flash site hosted a couple or a bunch of games where you could smash, slice, or blow characters up in ridiculous ways. They were the classic gore-style title games like Happy Wheels or the whole Beat the Blank series, games like Beat the Boss or Beat Your Ex, or it sounds so horrible to say. There was one called like Torture the Robber. I don't know, these games were literally just torture sims. So there was one on mobile and it was a little toned down because it was on iOS of course, but that game was Kick the Boss, which I think is directly inspired from those. Probably Beat the Boss specifically, but it's basically the same concept, an over-the-top, do-whatever-you-want mobile game. You're given the boss character, and the goal is, well, beat the shit out of him. They want you to punish him with literally anything you can unlock. Guns, explosives, traps, you name it. The more lethal, insane, and over-exaggerated, the better. It was part of that whole trend of mobile and flash games for kids where violence was insane, silly, and kind of a joke. You didn't need to care about realism, you just wanted to beat this guy up. Or you get like those extremely edgy Stickman games on Newgrounds and stuff. I used to love those. Kick the Boss stood out though because it was simple and easy to pick up and literally in your pocket, and absolutely relentless in letting you go wild. I know this game was pretty popular, but I honestly got bored of it in like 5 minutes to be honest. Most of the time it was just way too repetitive. Next up is Falling Fred. The game is simple. You launch Fred and watch him collide with spikes, walls, and traps. It doesn't really end though, it's an endless high score runner game kind of thing. So the point is just to survive as long as you can and seeing how far he goes and how much damage he takes. This was one of the more violent games on mobile for sure, especially for the time. And the last game I want to talk about is Stair Dismount. It's a ragdoll physics simulator I spent a lot of time on as a kid, where you push a dummy downstairs and try to get as much damage as possible. Wow, the early mobile games really had a thing for ragdolls, didn't they? So did flash games. But this game wasn't really as violent as the other ones I was mentioning, but it still is bizarre. This game has a very liminal feeling like I was saying with SurvivalCraft. I don't know, you're just kind of put in these big areas with a few objects and there's not really much going on. One of the strangest parts of the game was that you could put a real person's face onto the dummy if you wanted to, and suddenly it wasn't just a rag doll, it could be someone you knew or someone you don't know at all. And that's one of those other games though that just kinda gets boring after a few minutes. I don't know, it stuck with me though. I know a lot of people played Turbo Dismount too. And for now, that's it for this look at some of the most weirdest and most memorable early mobile games from my childhood. From the talking pets that everyone knew to Mcdickie's strange little worlds and over-the-top brutal experiments like Kick the Boss, Falling Fred, and Stair Dismount. All these games were janky or violent and sometimes just plain creepy, but that's exactly what makes them stick to your memory years later. I know I didn't cover everything, but that always leaves room for a part 2, and there's hundreds, maybe thousands of games like this flooding the market back then. But these are some of the ones that really left a mark for me, and if you have a favorite weird mobile game I didn't mention, please leave it in the comments, I'd love to hear it. And if you're interested in mobile games, maybe even subscribe and look at some of my more recent posts, since I do think this is my niche on YouTube. At least older, weirder ones. I just met my monetization requirements, so I'm pretty excited for that, and I'm even more motivated to make more content like this. Mobile games, flash games, just weird internet stuff in general. I hope you enjoyed this video and have a wonderful day.